welcome to the Daily Ascent. I'm Molly Carmel, and this is the podcast I always wish existed. A bite-sized, on-the-ground spiritual note to shift your thinking and your outlook on life, to make us all a little bit more awake, alive, and ascending. So today I want to talk about these moments that just feel like total and utter collapse. I've had a lot of these in my life in the last few years when everything that we are building seems to crumble. These moments that leave us gasping, wondering, why now? Why me? What's even happening here? And what I've learned though is that sometimes this falling apart is actually the beginning of the becoming. So, one of my dearest friends, Alisa Kriegel, wrote a book. She is like an incredible therapist. She's a colleague, she's a friend, she's all the things. And she is a trauma therapist and a couples therapist and had this calling to write a memoir. Brave. The memoir, if you want to know what's braver, the memoir is called From Sexless Marriage to Sex Goddess. And the first line of the book is something like, therapists are not supposed to talk about this. I mean, talk about juicy. It's such a good book. The book is as brave and beautiful as the title is. Highly recommend. And so I went to her book party, her book launch party, and it was wonderful. It was in a Brooklyn bookstore, and it was just like the vibe was so warm and fun and, laughter. And then it was time for Alisa to read to us from the book. And she's like a steady gal for sure, but you could feel the vulnerability humming underneath. And the reading she shared was about discovering that her husband was gay and how that shattered her world, and how ultimately, in shattering her world, she found this whole new version of herself. It really allowed for her to go on a path of self exploration. And she said, if I had never found out that he was gay, I never would have left. And I never would have become who I am now. And that idea landed in my chest like a bell, because I have seen that happen in my own life so many times. I had to let my business crumble to like kind of find out this new path that I'm on now. When romantic relationships have ended, when friendships have reached their natural close or unnatural close. Every time these things happen, my first reaction, not necessarily my response, but my first reaction is like, this is the end of the world. And each time it just becomes the start of a whole new world, to quote Aladdin. But, the person who talks about this so beautifully, and honestly, if you are in the market for a real pocket sage, especially in the state of the world right now, I think you might want to interview Pema Chodron. She is such, wow, sage is really the word for her. And she wrote a book, very famous book called When Things Fall Apart. And I want to read you these three lines from this book because it's just everything. Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible in us be found. When things fall apart and we're on the verge of we know not what, the test of each moment is to stay open. The trick is to keep your heart open in the middle of it all, to let the breaking become the opening. I'm going to read that again for those of you in the back, but I'm also going to read that for those of you in the front because, wow, this is everything. Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible in us be found. When things fall apart and we're on the verge of we know not what, the test of each moment is to stay open. The trick is to keep your heart open in the middle of it all, to let the breaking become the opening. And Pema's words, I mean, are just so beautifully profound there. And they remind me that what feels like a collapse, what feels like an ending, is always an invitation. It's an invitation and a reminder that our courage isn't measured by how tightly we hold on and get dragged, right? But actually how willing we are to stay awake and alive and open. And this is the deal with transformation, right? It never feels like it's supposed to. And life throws wrecking balls through all of our plans. And, we just scramble to patch the walls, act like we're fine, right? I've done that so many times. I've just smiled through the pain while I'm quietly falling apart inside and just trying to convince myself, like, I'm not lost. I'm fine. It's okay. But like, I was lost completely. And I think what I'm starting to realize is that being lost is not a failure. It's just the beginning of something wiser because the dust always settles. And when it does, there's always this small, steady part of me that whispers, like, okay, maybe this was here to grow me. And it always was. It really was. And that's a choice that we can make, even in grief. It doesn't mean we're not going to cry and ache and scream for what was. I mean, we're humans. We're supposed to be having feelings. And it doesn't make loss less heartbreaking, but we can decide that these endings are going to make us deeper and more connected and more whole. And, we can always keep this little part of ourselves pointed towards that truth that catalysts can change us for the better if we're open to it. That's our job if we're open to it. And so, word of the day today is catalyst. I love that word because catalysts spark transformation, right? It's the agent of change. It's the agent of change that changes everything, often without warning. That lightning bolt that strikes the tree, but then, clears some space for sunlight to come in and reach the forest floor. And catalysts are never comfortable. They burn and they shock and they often upend, but they move energy. They move stuck energy. And that movement, however messy, is the start of something new. And so when we can decide to let catalysts change us, to lean in instead of resist, that's where we can invite transformation to work for us, not against us. And so I want you to reflect on this question today. When something is ending in your life, how can you keep even a small part of yourself open to the possibility that this catalyst is here to grow you? And that's the question I'm carrying too, because endings are rarely tidy, my friends. They're messy and painful, and sometimes the holiest ground that we're going to stand on. So if you're in one right now, hold your heart gently. Let yourself grieve and let yourself believe that something beautiful might be trying to emerge through these cracks. And just remember, if you are looking for a little bit more support in your healing or your spiritual journey, you know, you just want to see what I'm up to, I have a great new website, mollycarmel.com. And there's lots and lots of ways for us to connect there. And if you're loving this pod, if you're really becoming an ascender, I would love for you to rate and share. The more, the merrier. And know that until next time, I am rooting you on so hard through this chaos and through this still. Until next time.